This video is a return to Quantum Starfarer, that rules light science fiction role-playing game written by Omer Golan Joel and Richard Hazelwood and published by Stella Gamma Publishing. It's also a repeat. I am doing this little introduction to replay or repost the first session of Quantum Starfarer that I ever ran. Why am I doing that? Well, the reason is that that first session of Quantum Starfarer existed as part of another playlist, part of another series. That was called A Tale of Two One-Shots, and it included me running a game of White Hack to run the adventure Mission Excalibur, and it included me using Quantum Starfarer to do something just on the spur of the moment. However, that Quantum Starfarer game was popular with my players, and we were looking for the right opportunity to run a second session, and that opportunity just presented itself. Spoiler, the second session went really well. We had more players that time, and it seemed like they really enjoyed themselves. And so it seems like we might continue to do this game. And for that reason, I want all the videos to be together. So if I want the pilot episode or the first episode of that game to be included in a new playlist that I'm going to create for Quantum Starfarer, I need to repost it with this little introduction. If you've already seen that video, then you can skip this one and go to the second video in this series, which I'm going to post simultaneous with this one. Thank you for tuning in, and here's the video. Hi, I'm Aldo. Welcome to Plays the Thing, the channel where I share my experiences prepping and playing tabletop role-playing games. This is the 6th episode in the series that I'm calling A Tale of Two One-Shots, and it's the point in the series where we finally get to our second game. The idiom for the second game is science fiction, and the specific game that we're playing is Quantum Starfarer, which is a rules-light science fiction role-playing game written by Omer Golan Joel and Richard Hazelwood and published by Stella Gamma Publishing. The fact that this is a rules-light game was what really drew us to it on this particular night. It was just 3 of us, my friends Dan and Mike and myself, who'd gathered with a desire to play something, but nothing planned, no larger group to pull into one of our usual games. We've been a little bit sick of fantasy because we've been doing so much of it. We decided to try something different. They both had a sci-fi itch they wanted to scratch. I had this slim little volume sitting on my PDF shelf, so I pulled it down and said, why don't we run this? We can be up and running in no time, and we can make characters, and we can play tonight, and that is what we decided to do. So let me give you a brief primer of how Quantum Starfarer works. It's a 2d6 system, meaning that you roll 2d6 and add a small number, which is usually the rank for the skill that you're trying to use to accomplish something. And if the total of all of that hits or beats a target number, you succeed. Target numbers are typically 4 for easy, 6 for average, 8 for difficult, 10 for formidable. That means you're usually trying to hit an 8, because I don't usually make characters or players roll on easy or average tasks unless there is like a time constraint or some sort of stress that's put on the situation. So typically you're trying to hit an 8 to succeed at something. Now, this is a classless system, or it's a skills-based system, so you don't pick a class. Instead, you have 5 points to distribute amongst 7 skills. That's it. The game only has 7 skills, but by selecting ranks in these skills, you're essentially defining what your character is like. The skills for this game are combat, knowledge, physical, social, space, stealth, and technical. You have 5 points to spread amongst these skills, and you can't put more than 3 in any one of these skills when you're starting out. Aside from that, you only have a few other things you need to do in character creation. You have to determine what your stamina is, and that is 7 plus your physical rank. Stamina is a resource that gets depleted when you take damage, but it's kind of like superficial damage. It's kind of like exhaustion, right? Like you're literally your stamina to kind of be able to go in a fight. And once a fight is over, you recover that pretty quickly. So as long as you're only losing stamina, you're doing all right. Lifeblood, however, is another resource that is calculated. It starts at 14 plus twice your physical skill. And once you're into Lifeblood, you're considered to be wounded and you suffer negatives to using your skills. And once you hit half of your Lifeblood, you are in a very serious situation. And once you lose all of your Lifeblood, you are dead. Aside from those two calculations of stamina and Lifeblood, you then have to select one trait for your character. And those traits help to add a little bit of nuance to the character, really kind of like nail down their function in some way. The traits are Ace, which gives you a bonus to making maneuvers in vehicle or spaceship combat. Assassin, which allows you to ignore a target's armor if you roll well. Ghost, which gives you an advantage to sneak in shadows and darkness. Hardy, which allows you to reduce the damage that you're taking as it comes in to a limited extent. Martial Artist, which gives you more damage dice when you're using hand-to-hand combat. Mr. Fix-It, which gives you bonuses when you're fixing vehicles or spacecraft. Profession, which gives you advantage on throws dealing with a non-combat skill of some sort. So that might be, well, not skill, but a non-combat use of a skill. So maybe that's profession as an advocate or a doctor or chef. Psionic, which gives you 2 psionic powers of your choosing. Surgeon, which helps you gives you a bonus to treating characters that have been damaged in combat. And Thief, which gives you advantage to skills related to stealing items and pickpocketing and fencing goods and that sort of thing. So a relatively short list of traits. It would be easy enough to invent your own traits if you wanted them, but this is enough to get you started with something that is maybe uniquely yours if you're a character. After picking traits, all you have to do to finish your character is roll some money, buy some equipment, and off you go. I presented those rules to Mike and Dan, and these are the characters that they created. Dan's character is Val. She is kind of an XP of Mal from Firefly, right? So she owns her own ship. She travels around space in the frontier of space, making a living by trading things back and forth. And she's trying to stay out of the watchful eye of an unspecified but oppressive and problematic government. She also has a little bit of Han Solo sprinkled in there. We decided that she has a relationship with a criminal syndicate. In fact, it was taking a loan from this criminal syndicate was essential for her to have her ship, and as a consequence, that criminal syndicate will pull strings and ask her to do missions every once in a while as a way of paying off her debt. If we look at the stats, you'll notice that her skills are Combat 1. She can defend herself somewhat, but she's not like a major combatant. Space 3, the maximum that she could put in space. So she's a darn good pilot and darn good navigator and all those other things. And 1 in technical. So when the ship breaks down, she can tinker with it and try to fix it. For her trait, she took Ace, which doubles down on the fact that she's a really good pilot. So she'll get additional bonuses when she's trying to pull off certain maneuvers in space combat situations. And then she has her equipment, which includes a blaster, a combat knife, some grenades, ballistic cloth armor, a spacesuit, a backpack, and other odds and ends: binoculars, communicator, field rations, omnicomp, thruster pack, toolkit, and water tablets. She's outfitted for adventuring. She's outfitted for surviving out in space. Pretty easy and quick character to make. Let's now turn to Mike's character. Meet Aaron. Aaron is a psionicist, a scion. Mike was drawn to that trait right from the beginning of character generation. So rather than start with his skills, he went to the traits first and said, I want a scion. And as he was sort of working through the character out loud, he decided that he wanted to have a scion that was kind of manufactured by this government, the space government that we keep talking about. There are naturally born scions in the setting, and they have a place in the government's operation, but they're a relatively limited resource, and the government wanted to replicate or create more scions for their operations. And so that's what Mike's character is. He is a laboratory created scion drawing on DNA from other scions, and he was trained specifically to be a spy, an infiltrator of some sort. He didn't like that. He grew to rebel against that, and he escaped. And we decided during character generation that he had snuck onto Val's ship while he was on the run. When she blasted off into the frontier, he was with her. And then we were a little light on how it is that they worked out that situation. But in the long run, Val accepted him as a crew member. And now they're out there again, keeping away from the watchful eye of said government. So let's take a look at what Aaron looks like. He has 2 in knowledge, and that is because the use of psionic abilities depends on that knowledge skill. He has a 1 in social, so he's trained as a spy, so he can, in terms of interaction skills, taking on alternate identities and that sort of thing, he has some skill in that. He has a 1 in technical and a 1 in stealth. He can, knows how to stay out of the way and knows how to fix things a little bit. He's young. He didn't finish his training. That makes sense for the situation. In terms of his specific psionic gifts or talents, these are what he picked. He has psionics alter self, which allows him to change his appearance to match another person of the same species. So he can basically shift his form to look like different humans. And he has the ability regeneration, which allows him to immediately regain lifeblood once he's lost it. And it's cool because body control, body morphing, those 2 psionic talents seem to be related to one another in some way. So he has a nice tight little kind of like a specialty that he has at his disposal. Then in terms of his equipment, again, he did the same as Dan did for Val. So rolled some money, bought some stuff. He has a blaster, a dagger, a ballistic cloth flight suit, a space suit, binoculars, cold weather clothing, communicator, compass, hooligan tool, hot weather clothing, med kit, multi-scanner, omnicomp, omnitool, rope, super adhesive, super solvent, and a toolkit. So he must have rolled better money-wise than Dan did for Val. He also has field rations and water tablets. So he's pretty well outfitted as well, and they are ready for action. So at this point, once they finished, and it took us maybe half an hour to make characters, I had to decide what it was we were going to do that night. I was game mastering. So how did play look like? What happened in play? How did I prepare for play? Well, basically the way that I prepped is that I just listened to them as they were making their characters, and I took down some notes, and I was trying to feverishly come up with things that would just emerge from all of that I could just kind of throw at them to see what would happen. And I basically decided right from the get-go that I would leverage Dan's relationship to that criminal syndicate. In fact, I went in and gave them some specifics. So the Shadow Vortex is the name of the syndicate, maybe just the Vortex. The specific gangster that Val had done business with, that she'd taken a loan from, is Darius Voss. Darius Voss has operatives. One of those operatives is a woman by the name of Vara Nexia. And I imagine Vara as this purple woman with light violet eyes and black hair, kind of thick black hair that's kind of combed back, and she's well armed and lightly armored and walks with confidence and has a sense of humor as well. I kind of imagined those characters as they were making their characters. I also decided that I would come up with a rival syndicate for the Shadow Vortex, and that ended up being the Ember Vale. And the Ember Vale operates out of a place called Pyroxia Prime, and very specifically, they have one of their primary headquarters is at Magma Haven, which is a spaceport on Pyroxia Prime. Pyroxia Prime being a primarily kind of volcanic planet, so think lots of magma and volcanoes and lava rivers and that sort of thing. And they are kind of placed in the sector so that they're a hub. They're a stop-off place for people that are doing business in this part of the frontier. And that is where the Ember Vale has a really, really strong presence. But that's not where the character started. Another thing that I did is kind of decide that the characters were going to be fully in the frontier. So they've already been through the Ember Vale. They're familiar with it to some degree. They go through it every once in a while. But Val and Aaron were currently at a planet called Xylaris. and specifically at a place called Glimmerstone Ridge. And Glimmerstone Ridge was a location, or is a location, where there is a mining concern that has set up shop on this planet, and they are trying to mine something called lumina crystals that they haven't found a really big like deposit of them yet, but there's enough to suggest that there's something here. And so they're trying to kind of like mine this planet, and they have these kind of like tense relationships with the indigenous people of the planet, some of which are collaborating with the concern, others that are angry about the fact that their planet is being harvested. We're saying that Val and Aaron were there probably after dropping off some supplies to Glimmerstone Ridge, and they were kind of between jobs, and I decided that that is where Varanexia was going to approach them about something that Darius Voss wanted Val to do. I sketched out, really not even on paper, just in my mind, a very basic look, kind of like an Old West style look for Glimmerstone Ridge, because I knew that's where the characters were going to start off. And then I also had a sketch, but a very, very basic sketch of the setup at Pyroxia Prime in the area near Magma Haven. Because I knew that's where Varanexia was going to send them on behalf of Darius Voss. I wasn't sure if the players were going to bite. It was very possible that the characters would get pissed off at Varanexia and attack her. I mean, I didn't know, but I was pretty sure that they would probably follow up on the situation that was presented to them, in part because Dan himself said that she sometimes has to do these missions for Darius Voss. So I was pretty sure that they would, but I was also ready for them to kind of like ignore these situations that were presented to them. And for that reason, I pulled out this little volume, Stars Without Number, right? So Kevin Crawford makes a cameo appearance as a resource that didn't get used. The reason I pulled this out is because the best thing about Stars Without Number are all the random tables that you have in here to generate situations and planets and governments and missions and NPCs and etc. So if for whatever reason the player character said, okay, maybe we will go do that, but not right now. Right now we're going to do something else, I was ready with these tables to generate something for us to do that thing. But that didn't happen. They decided to do what I put before them. So why don't we get to what actually happened in play? So the session began with Val and Aaron sitting in a watering hole at Glimmerstone Ridge when Varanexia walks into the place. Val immediately recognizes her as one of Voss's operatives, but decides not to acknowledge Varanexia immediately. I then described Varanexia's attitude, how she approached the table for a drink, how she looked at them and made eye contact with Theron, who was the one that was actually kind of kept looking in her direction, how some of the locals came up and started giving Varanexia a hard time, how she dealt with them pretty confidently and humiliated a couple of them who thought they were a big deal, and she effectively but non-violently cut them down. I described how Vara left the building after dealing with those people, how she left the building. At that point, Val and Aaron decided that they would go and shadow her. When they came out of the building, she was just leaning against the door there saying, I was wondering what took you so long. We should talk. And at that point, they started walking towards the spaceport. And Varanexia then laid down the information. Basically, she said, look, Boss has something that he wants you to do. I know it's been a while, but this will take out a significant chunk of what you owe on the ship. But it's dangerous. Basically, he wants you to discredit his rivals, of course, being the Ember Vale, who are, as I've already said, headquartered at Magma Haven. Now, the situation at Magma Haven presents itself us with an opportunity because apparently there was a very small archaeological expedition that was being carried out by a big university from the inner worlds. And there was a token government presence on the planet that was easy to deal with. They were probably, on the take and all of that. But apparently this archaeological expedition attached to the university discovered something which has brought a bigger government presence to the planet. So there are, and I don't want to say Imperium because it's not an Imperium. I don't want it to be that Star Wars, but it has brought a greater concentration of government troops there. It's a very small garrison, but it's a bigger garrison nonetheless. And the word is that there will be more reinforcements coming. So there's something of value to the government at this archaeological site. Darius Voss would love it if Val and her crew went to Pyroxia Prime and tried to figure out what was there and maybe take it. Now, having something of value like that would be nice, but that's actually not the primary reason why Voss is sending them there. He says, if you can get that object and figure out what it is, and second, bring it to me, then there's a big bonus for you, depending on what it is. Your basic mission will be completed if your infiltration / attack / robbery of whatever is there is done in a way that convincingly ties the event to the Ember Veil. Because what his interest was in the government, who might come in and establish a bigger presence, for them to basically go after the Ember Veil and kind of remove his competition. Barrow's like, yeah, that's what he wants. And Val and Aaron, and I think Dan and Mike were both like, geez, that sounds like huge. Like, that sounds big. Like, what the heck do we do? I don't know. I don't even know where to begin. So I don't know. I, Game Master, didn't know where they were going to begin either. I didn't have any sense of what the best place was for them to begin. They flew over to Magma Haven. They landed at the spaceport. I told them, that there are places here where you can go and interact with the Ember Veil. I mean, they are here. But they didn't do that. Instead, they asked around a little bit and they got a sense of the layout. Basically, what you had was Magma Haven, the spaceport. You had a lot of kind of roads that wound along like the volcanic rocks and mountains in the region that took you to other settlements that were nearby. And then there was this like winding path that went up a mountain to a plateau way up on the mountain where the archaeological expedition was. And then you had this kind of makeshift bunker that had been set up there. And they did a little bit of asking around and they said, yeah, there's like a small garrison up there. They come down here to Magma Haven for R&R every once in a while. They use kind of like speeder bike equivalents and other hover vehicle equivalents to get back and forth. But for the most part, they keep to themselves. And there's a small landing pad up there as well. So government ships can come in and out of that plateau area too. Mike and Dan asked me, like, are there any well-known operatives for the Ember Veil? I think I had them make a knowledge roll or something. And I said, yeah, you know what? I decided that there was an army of Rutger Hauer clones that, not an army, but like a group of Rutger Hauer clones that they employ as kind of like assassins, not real Rutger Hauer clones, but played by Rutger Hauer. I don't know why I had this kind of like 70s, 80s vibe in my mind going on with something. So I thought that would be fun and funny. And so then Aaron disguised himself as basically turned into Rutger Hauer, used the psionics to transform into a Rutger Hauer lookalike, made sure that he had an Ember Veil like tattoo on his arm or something like that. And then they just got on a speeder bike and they started winding their way up towards the installation. They asked while they were going up if they could see any cameras. So I had them make a roll and I said, yeah, sure enough, you do see that there are cameras mounted that, at different spots that show the traffic. And so then basically they decided that before every camera they were gonna stop and tinker with the camera and modify, like put it on a loop so whoever's seeing the information will see the same information. And that was going to involve, actually, they couldn't hack into the cameras from a distance. They had to move up physically to the camera and program them that way physically. So it was fine. They did a good job of that. They successfully managed to do that to all the cameras. I had predetermined how many cameras there were, And if I'm honest, I should have just made them make one roll because it became kind of repetitive to go and do this for each and every one of the cameras. Halfway up, they encountered a sentry, but managed to evade it. And then they got all the way up to the side of this installation where it basically had like a blast door that led into like a small hangar where they would probably keep their grab vehicles and whatnot. And then, you know, beyond that bunker, if they can get into that building and go through the building, they would get out to like the landing pad that was up on the installation. They figured, right? So they're like, okay, let's try to get in there. So then they went in, they ran up to the wall, they opened the lock, they jiggered with it, they got the blast doors to open with some really good technical rolls. And when it opened, there were two dudes in there. Like one was a technician, one was a security guard. They were both kind of taken by surprise. And then a firefight broke out. So they started blasting at each other. It was a pretty fast and furious fight. In this game, actually, there's no initiative. All actions are simultaneous, which gave it kind of a charge. In the end, they managed to take down both of these guys. One of them took some damage. And then the whole time they're like, oh crap, we're made. Like people are going to come for us now. Like we're not getting in there. Mike's character was sure to like take off his goggles, like pretending that, you know, he was like, so and like look at the camera so they can see the Rutger Hauer face. And then like he made sure that he'd flex his arm and like show the tattoo that he had on his arm and stuff. It was all kind of heavy handed. But we were having a lot of fun with it, and just in trying to basically say, hey, look, I work for the Ember Vale. Like, ooh, look at me doing bad stuff. And then they basically got on their hover bikes and like shot out down to the back to Magma Haven. And then it was just a few rolls more. You know, they were able to get back on their ship and leave because Val was also very careful to say that she was very covered up when she was over there. So there was really nobody that could identify them. And that was the whole one shot. that was the whole one shot. It is so anticlimactic, right? Like me telling you what we did feels like maybe we didn't do anything. But we actually did. You know, those interactions with Varanexia were fun and more involved, that I give you them kind of brainstorming what it was that they were going to do and asking questions, them interacting with one another and interacting with the situations going up there. I don't know. I mean, we played for about 3 hours that night, maybe 2.5 hours that night. And we had a lot of fun. And we walked away from the session saying that felt fresh. That was surprising. It was fun, and they wanted to do it again. And we plan to actually. Like we haven't had the opportunity because we've had the group kind of show up regularly for a while now. So, you know, this is a game that we're thinking we'll do with a much smaller group. But, you know, people, myself included, were, I don't know, it was maybe just a couple of encounters, but we really had a lot of fun doing it. And if we'd had more time and a little more energy that night, we could have, again, generated more with some of the resources that I had at my disposal. But really, we felt that was enough. So there you have it. All of my musings about our game of Quantum Starfarer, system description, character generation, and a full play report, all in about half an hour, versus what we did with Whitehack and Mission Excalibur, which, you know, was 4 episodes to do all of the same. What does that tell us? I don't think that tells us much, to be honest. It doesn't mean that one was more successful than the other, that one was better than the other. I think what it tells us is simply when you're working with a published adventure that has a lot of material laid out for characters to interact with or not in the setting, it just means that characters are going to be drawn to a lot of different options and maybe decide what it is they're going to do with them. One of the interesting things I thought about Mission Excalibur is that the characters encountered a lot of things that they interacted with, but ultimately they ended up deciding not to use. The Panzer Tank, Cleveland Pudding, a host of other things that the characters encountered, but then they didn't do anything with. And instead, they basically just pulled into themselves and used 1 or 2 resources to pull off what they pulled off. In the case of Quantum Starfarer, that wealth of elements that were preset out for characters to kind of encounter and do something with wasn't there because I didn't have the time to prep all of that, nor would I have probably, even if I had had the time. The characters came up with their own approach to how they were going to solve the situation and immediately went for it, rather than walking around looking for things that they might feel like they need to use. So I guess one was a more streamlined, but far more simplistic play experience. And the other one was a more exploratory play experience that generated a lot of possibilities, and then the players ended up selecting a couple. What I tried to model in both of these situations was that I had no overall story. In both cases, I had a situation, and then I let the players loose to figure out how it was that they were going to interact with that situation. And eventually they made decisions that produced outcomes. And if these were ongoing campaigns, then we would take those specific outcomes and use them as springboards for further play. Anyway, that's it. Those are my experiments here. We finally got to the end of the series, and we'll do some other stuff soon. Until then, thank you for tuning in. As always, I wish you good health. I wish you good cheer. I wish you good gaming. Goodbye.